Morning. This is part 2 of Unit 9 for the book Ventures 4 for Kcpc for the day that would have been teaching this, which is 5/21. So today we're going to read our book and we're going to begin on page 116. So here we have the word fable. Before you read, talk with your classmates, answer the questions, what is a fable? So what do you think a fable is? Remember, you're supposed to be talking out loud. What is a fable?
Here's some information.
So I asked Siri to tell me about fables. Fable is a short fictional story that anthropomorphizes non-humans to illustrate a moral lesson. It is a short fictional story that features animals, legendary creatures, plants, inanimate objects that are anthropomorphized and that illustrate or lead to a particular moral lesson, which may at the end be added explicitly as a maxim or a saying. Okay, if you do that, ask Siri, this is what you will get. F-A-B-L-A. F-A-B-L-E. A short fictional story that anthropomorphizes. So what does anthropomorphic mean? It means to give human qualities to those things that are not human, like making a story out with a fox and having the fox speak, or a bird speaks, which is impossible. But so you're giving human qualities to something that is not human. So fables do that. They use animals and give them human qualities to tell a moral story, to tell usually right from wrong, a good choice from a bad choice. Okay, so here is the first story. It's called All Things Are Connected. And what I would like you to do is to listen first. I also want you to know that when I looked this story up, it said the title of it was called The Frog Hunt. And they usually give the origin of fables, and this one originated in, it said Zaire. Anybody know where Zaire is or was? That's right, the continent of Africa. Is it still called Zaire? No, it is now called the Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay, it's right in the middle, and it is a really big country right in the middle of Africa. So it was really fun for me when I went to my computer and looked it up. Okay, so let's listen.
Page 116, Exercise 2.
All things are connected. There was a village chief who never allowed anyone to disagree with him. Whenever he wanted to do something, he asked the members of his court for their advice. But whether the chief's idea was wise or foolish, his advisers always said the same thing. Indeed, it is wise. Only one old woman dared to give a different answer. Whenever the chief asked for her advice, she always replied, All things are connected. One night, the chief was awakened by the sound of frogs croaking in the swamp. It happened again the next night, and the next, and the next. The chief decided to kill all the frogs in the swamp. When he consulted the members of his court, they replied, as usual, "Indeed, it is wise." But the old woman kept silent. "You, old woman, what do you think?" the chief demanded. "All things are connected," she replied. The chief concluded that the old woman was a fool, and he ordered his servants to kill all the frogs. Therefore, the chief slept peacefully. But soon the mosquitoes in the swamp began to multiply, since there were no frogs to eat them. They came into the village and made everyone miserable. The chief ordered his servants to go into the swamp and kill the mosquitoes, but it was impossible. Furious, the chief summoned the members of his court and blamed them, saying, "Why didn't you tell me that killing the frogs would make the mosquitoes multiply and everyone would be miserable? I should have listened to the old woman." Because the mosquitoes were there, all the people of the village were forced to go away. Finally, the chief and his family left too. Until he died, the chief never forgot the old woman's words. All things are connected.
Okay, so that was a very interesting story. And let's read what it says up here in the little red box. Everyone, ask yourself questions when you read to identify a cause and effect relationship. To find an effect, ask what happened. To find the cause, ask why did it happen. On the left-hand side, number 1, before you read, it says, what is a fable? So it's really what? It's a short story, and it usually uses animals that can speak or have human qualities, and it tells a moral lesson. Right. Okay. So, number 2, do you know any fables or folk tales from your native country? So it might be kind of interesting to discuss this with someone in your family or your neighbor and ask them about folk tales from their country, and you tell them about folk tales from your country, which is kind of interesting because then you'll have a chance to practice and read up at first and then go to a neighbor and speak in English and ask them about folk tales from their country. Okay, so let's go to reading this particular fable. How do you pronounce it? Fable. Everyone, all things are connected. Long ago, there was a village chief who never allowed anyone to disagree with him. Whenever he wanted to do something, he asked the members of his court for their advice. But whether the chief's idea was wise or foolish, his advisers always said the same thing. Indeed, it is wise. Only one old woman dared to give a different answer. Whenever the chief asked for her advice, she always replied, "All things are connected." One night, the chief was awakened by the sound of frogs croaking in the swamp. It happened again the next night, and the next, and the next. The chief decided to kill all the frogs in the swamp. But when he consulted the members of his court, they replied as usual, "Indeed, it is wise." But the old woman kept silent. "And you, old woman, what do you think?" the chief demanded. "All things are connected," she replied. The chief concluded that the old woman was a fool, and he ordered his servants to kill all the frogs. Therefore, the chief slept peacefully. But soon the mosquitoes in the swamp began to multiply since there were no frogs to eat them. They came into the village and made everyone miserable. The chief ordered his servants to go into the swamp and kill the mosquitoes. But it was impossible. Furious, the chief summoned the members of his court and blamed them, saying, "Why didn't you tell me that killing the frogs would make the mosquitoes multiply, and everyone would be miserable? I should have listened to the old woman." Because the mosquitoes were there, all the people of the village were forced to go away. Finally, the chief and his family left too. Until he died, the chief never forgot the old woman's words. All things are connected. Oh, this is very interesting that this fable and this story would come up at this time in our lives, isn't it? I would like to do the vocabulary before we do the understanding, because we're going to be using these words in our replies, and I want to make sure that everyone understands what the words are. So in the little blue box here, it says useful language. An antonym is a word that has the opposite meaning. Good, the antonym bad. Hard, the antonym easy. Tall, the antonym short. So what is the small little part of antonym that gives you a hint as to what it might mean? That's right. A-N-T, anti, means against, right? Push against, the opposite. Anti, the opposite. Okay. In the reading, B, build your vocabulary. In the reading passage, underline the words from the chart. So I like using a yellow highlighter, which makes it really easy to see. Number 2, use a dictionary or a thesaurus. Write the part of speech. Write an antonym for each word. So I can't remember whether it was this class or the other that I talked about a thesaurus. So this is the thesaurus, Roget's Thesaurus. It's not a dictionary because a dictionary gives the meaning plus the synonym and the antonym of the words. But a thesaurus is it is absolutely synonyms. And it also gives the parts of speech. It will say nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Then it will give the antonyms. So it's a very valuable book when writing compositions or doing papers. Let's go back to the book, page 117. First word, wise. What part of speech? Adjective. Antonym, foolish. Number 2, connected. Verb. Antonym, unconnected. So think about your house and think of plugs that you have in the walls. What do you do when you do this? Plug it in, and then your device is connected to electricity. So what do you do that's the antonym? Unplug. Okay. Next, peacefully. Part of speech? ly is the big hint here, right? It's an adverb. How did you sleep? Peacefully describes a verb. Or how did they interact with each other? Peacefully. So the antonym would be aggressively, belligerently, hostily, right? Peaceful, hostile, peaceful, warlike. I'm sure you had others. Next, multiply. Part of speech, verb. So the opposite of multiply would be decrease. Did you get lessen? Lessen. How about lower? How about curtail? Curtail. This would be this is really fun, asking Siri and hearing and looking up what it has to say. Next, miserable. Part of speech, adjective. Antonym, joyous, merry, merry, mirthful, happy, cheerful, furious. Part of speech, adjective. Okay, opposite, calm, peaceful. Sure you got more. Next, summoned. It's a verb. So what does summon mean? Yes, it means to call someone and to come here, to come to a particular place. And it's usually used in a very formal, lawful way. Usually courts use the word summon. You get a summons to appear in court for a particular court case. You can also use it in regular conversation in normal situations, but it has a much stronger meaning than just calling someone and telling someone to come over. It's usually an order. Come here. Next one, blamed. Part of speech, verb. Good. And the antonym, approved. What about praised? Anyone get endorsed? Okay. The next one, swamp. So here, there's two meanings to this word. One could be a verb, one could be a noun. In this story, it's a noun. So in this story, what does swamp mean? Muddy, boggy, water, squishy. So the opposite of that, the antonym for that kind of swamp would be solid, dry, but it's also a noun, and it's not this meaning in this story, but sometimes people are swamped with work. What would that mean? Yes, that means they are overwhelmed, that they just have way, way, way too much to do. So the opposite would be inactive, tolerate, just enough. Okay, so here we're almost ready to end this video and go on to the next, but I wanted to go over the life lessons from Fables. So at the end of Fables, they usually give a little meaning as to why the fable was given in the first place. For example, never give up. be slow and steady. So we're going to continue that in the next video.